videos with the lab demonstration. It's going to show how the lab is built and, like I say, how it should be used from start to finish. So the video recording starts with the GNS3 network simulator, which the lab is built in, opening up, and that's the network topology that you can see there with the attack machine and the Kali Linux machine on the left hand side, and the cold box, which is the target machine, on the right hand side. This is the interfaces opening up, and this hypervisor works directly with VirtualBox to open the interfaces that we'll be working on from now on, which you can see the Kali Linux one loading up now, and also the ColdBox interface, which is loading up as well. The rest of the video demonstration is all going to be performed from the virtual machine interfaces, which are in VirtualBox. And GNS3 there was there just as the interactive visual guide to how the network topology works. So the lab guide follows the zero entry methodology for penetration testing, which is a combination of reconnaissance, scanning, exploitation, and then maintaining access at the end of the exploit. You can see now that the Kali machine is finding its IP address, which is what the first instruction in the lab guide tells the user to do. And then once that is done, we can begin the reconnaissance and scanning part of the penetration test. The machine now is basically scanning the network for the target machine to find its IP address, so we can then start performing the penetration tests as it should be done on the target. If you look at the lab guide, which should be used in association with the VirtualBox interfaces, it gives the user instructions on how Nmap works and different commands to pass to Nmap to get different results. So the command that is being passed now is Nmap SV, which has found the target machine, but it's now scanning for services on this target machine, which you can see here is identified the target and it has identified some services that are running on that machine. The lab guide also states now at this point to direct to the target machine's website using the IP address that has been found from the initial Nmap scan. This is to further any understandings of the target and see what information we can gather. And the video demonstration, you can see that it's highlighting that there's a login page that may be of some interest, and also that the website itself is built using WordPress, which you can see there. Now, this is still at the early stage of the penetration test, which is still in the scanning stage and information gathering, which is highlighted in the lab guide. There's a key importance for the penetration test. So picking up on the website is built using WordPress. It directs in the lab guide now for the user to use the WordPress tool to do further information gathering of the target site, which you can see in the video demonstration. And now the WordPress scanner has picked up what version the website is built in, whether it's out of date, whether there's anything interesting found from the initial WordPress scan. Which, if you refer to the lab guide as well, it says any information can be valuable at this stage for further exploitations later on down the line. It also gives commands for the user to pass to the WordPress scanner. This one now is basically enumerating the WordPress website to find any users, which basically is just deeper scanning of the target site to reveal any further information. Referring to the lab guide as well, you can see from start to finish that it does tell the user the exact commands to pass to the command line, and I hope that they can get them right, to basically as well to find any of the different commands that can pass within the WordPress scanner to find any further information of the target site. So we can see now that the scanner's done to find users on the website. It's found several different user accounts that can be of some interest to investigate. And following the lab guide again at this point, it is now moving on from the scanning stage to the exploitation, or the first exploit, which would be to see if we can gain access to one of these user accounts. This would be task 4 on the lab guide. And the lab guide at this point, it points out how we can gain access using the WordPress scanner and using its password cracking capabilities by passing a command to the WordPress scanner that basically gives it a word list to run the password cracking on, and specifying which user you would like to try the password cracking attempt on. Again, at this point in the lab guide, the command is given and is told that it should be put in there exactly as to get the WordPress scanner to start the password cracking. It's quite a long command to put in, and it felt necessary to include all of the commands that were needed as an extra guidance for the users of the lab, so they could use the tools efficiently without getting any errors or the scanner's not doing anything. It's definitely worth mentioning at this point that the administrator's account is the account called Coles, or C0LDD, and that's the one that we're running the password crack on. This account has purposely got a weak password. The other accounts, if you try and run a password crack on them, they've got strong passwords, so it does stop any further exploitation. The account that we need to exploit, or that we're interested in exploiting for the purpose of this demonstration, is the administrator's account, which has just been cracked, and it shows the password there, weak password, in plain text. We can see it being highlighted in the video now. So looking back at the lab guide, we can see that we've moved on now to basically instructing the user to see if they can log in and log into the user account with the password that we found, which we'll see in a minute we can do. And then this is where we can really sort of start to exploit the target further and see if there's anything that we can do to gain further access into the system. The lab guide instructs the user to look around for any valuable information, sort of playing back on the reconnaissance and information gathering stage of the zero entry methodology. It is always useful to find as much information as possible in a penetration test scenario, so we can use that information later on as it might come in valuable. It could come in valuable. So we can see here, this is basically the administrator's login account on the WordPress website, and the lab guide instructs the user now to find anywhere where we can possibly upload a reverse shell, which we want to upload a reverse shell so we can gain remote access to the target system in order to exploit it further. So the page is the 404 page not found. The lab guide instructs the user to find any place where there's raw text that we can upload a reverse shell and save it. Again, so this is so we can continue the exploitation of the target machine. Because doing a reverse shell can be quite complicated thing to do, and the purpose of this lab is aimed at new users to Linux systems and introductory to penetration testing. The reverse shell code itself was put is a pre-configured reverse shell program, and it has been uploaded onto the Kali Linux machine just to copy and paste over onto the correct page that we want to put our shell onto. Now, at this moment in the video demonstration, you can see the navigation to the page, so we can see the page that we want to put the reverse shell onto, just to see if it's a suitable place, obviously, to put the code, and then obviously we can then refresh it once the code has been uploaded, and that's going to basically give the reverse shell access to the machine. So now we can see the target page is being used. There are other pages that you can use on the website, but for the purposes of video demonstration, we're using the 404 page that I found. This is the reverse shellcode that is pre-installed on the Kali machine at the beginning of the lab, and the lab guide instructs the user just copy the full of the code over and place it onto the page that we want to use for the exploit. In the lab guide, it does say that the only things that would needed to be done to make this successful is change the IP address to the IP address of the Kali Linux machine. This is so we can set up a port listening, so we can basically see once the reverse shell has been activated, it'll give us access to the target machine. So in the video now, we were just double checking that we have set in the correct IP address of the Kali machine, which is being entered into the page on the website now, as you can see. We're not changing the port number. The port number, even though it says change this, it's being left at 1234, and that's what we are going to be setting up to listen on that port for the reverse shell being executed. Which, if we refer to the lab guide as well, it does give the user instructions of the command that they need to set, so we can capture the reverse shell being executed and gain that remote access. Which I believe this next step in the video is the command that we need to use for the reverse shell. Sorry, not for the reverse shell, but to listen to the reverse shell being executed. So that's the port set up and listening, ready for the reverse shell to be captured. You can see there it says it's listening on port 1234. We navigate back to the target site, and at this point we set the IP address and we're ready to save the code, which you can see here says upload file. Again, this is all directed in the lab guide, so the user can follow suit for this. And to execute this, we're just refreshing the page. You can see here nothing changes here, but if we direct ourselves back to the lab guide, the command line interface, we can see that we've captured the reverse shell is being executed. There is actually a screenshot of what it should show in the lab guide, just so the user can see that they're definitely on the correct page. Definitely that the reverse shell has been executed. So again, it's another visual representation, so they can see that what they're doing is correct and the reverse shell has been executed. Now, this stage, this is still the exploitation stage, and we want to exploit the target machine further. And this is going to be done through what's called privilege escalation, which basically is using commands to elevate the privilege of a Linux program so we can get root access and break out of this restrictive shell that we've got now. So in the lab guide, it tells the user to print the contents of the user.txt file, which is purposely done so we can see that the permission is denied, hinting to the user that we need to further exploit the machine so we can get access to this text file. So what this is doing now is basically using the find program, which is a program that we can basically use to elevate the privilege, and we can see through that final command, the user /bin/find/exec, that once that command is executed, it increases our privilege, or it upgrades our privilege to root privilege. And we can see now that we are now listed as root. And finally, it does say in the lab guide to, once to do this, go and try and print the contents of the user.txt file. And upon doing this, you can see that the contents of the file has been printed in plain text.